The Speaking of Cults podcast is presented solely for general informational, educational, and entertainment purposes. The use of information on this podcast or materials linked from it is at the user's own risk. The views, information, or opinions expressed by the host and guests are solely those of the individuals involved and do not constitute medical or other professional advice. Hello and welcome to the Speaking of Cults podcast. My name is Chris Shelton. I am your host. Thank you very much for joining me this week. We are going to dive into an interesting topic, something I have sort of name dropped a few times over the years in reference to oddball or sort of not well known or, non-mainstreamed kind of cults that are out there, or groups, let's say, that are a little high control, a little bit abusive, and radical honesty is the group that we are going to be talking about today. Now, this is all started in 1997. A man named Brad Blanton wrote a book called Radical Honesty and forwarded the idea that being radically honest is the way to go, that you should never tell any lie of any kind, not even the little whitest ones, nothing. It is just straight, brutal, honest truth. That is the key to happiness and success. And in fact, personal transformation. This is a personal transformation group using truth or honesty as sort of the vehicle. Yet, when you start digging into what you can do with this kind of push to people, and because honesty sounds great. Honesty sounds wonderful. But like I always stress, cults are not about their beliefs. It's about what they do with them. And you can use truth in an abusive way. And you can create a culture, an environment of so-called truth-telling, which creates situations where accountability and consequences maybe don't happen. And that's not a good place to be anywhere, anytime, anyhow. So let's go ahead and dive into this with someone who actually took part in it and contacted me some time ago to let me know that there was activity happening within this group that was sort of pushing back against some of this and what was happening with that. And if you're familiar with my work in this history, you'll know it didn't go smoothly. So today I welcome, and please forgive my pronunciation, Jura Glo. Did I get that right?
Yeah, you did.
Excellent. Welcome to my show. Thank you very much for stepping up and speaking publicly about this. I know it's a major step to do so and put yourself out there.
Thank you, Chris.
You bet. So let's go ahead and get started, I guess, let's do first a real quick, what is this thing? Because all I've said is there was a book published and there's this guy, right? But he's created a whole network of forums, workshops, seminars, retreats, get-togethers, or, this even happens here in Denver. There's an outlet for this. So what is this thing, sort of big picture?
So how back in history do you want me to go?
Well, let's go ahead and go from 97. And this is the short form, right? Just the summary version of what are we looking at overall,
Yeah.
right?
So what we're looking at is what's called a psychotherapy cult. Mm-hmm. Back in the 70s, from the encounter groups, Esalen Institute formed a human potential movement. The one of the famous one was Werner Erhard one. So apparently Brad was in his prime years around everything was happening. So he attended a bunch of workshops. When he was 25 years old, he obtained a PhD in clinical psychology, education, and philosophy, or existential philosophy. And so what we know now, by we I mean the people who left at this point, this is only the bits and pieces that we found out because the digital footprint is not there, so we had to dig. And so what we know so far is that Brad went to a bunch of workshops, retreats with Werner, with Fritz Perls, with Simpkins, Erickson, and when I asked Brad in 2017, I was like, Brad, why did you become a Gestalt? How did you become a Gestalt therapist? He said, well, I went to 2 weekend workshops with Fritz Perls, and he invited me to his house, something. And then I came back to the Washington, D.C. and started to call myself a Gestalt therapist. So that's what he told me. And I was like, that's very interesting, because that's exactly how I started to call myself a radical honesty trainer. I went to his workshop, and then I got back to Berlin, and I was like, I'm just going to call myself radical honesty workshop leader, a trainer. So,
yep. There you go. There you go. And this, and then he used these credentials as though this was some sort of a therapeutic approach.
Yeah. So he's established a center of well-being because he believed that he took whatever he absorbed from the groups at the time. He believed that what's really healing for people is to tell the whole truth. Skipping in my mind a few facts, but it's different. There's one thing about the effects of telling the truth. We all know that in therapeutic relationship, being honest with a therapist and building a genuine relationship is healing for people. But Brad, I think because of the Est influence, the whole Scientology idea, the Dianetics influence, Brad opens his first book with the quote from Hubbard about what the mind is. So I think because of that his own cultic influence, he took the truth telling to the cultiverse level, basically, where he said the premise of his work is that everybody's a goddamn liar, and telling the truth eliminates stress, makes you happier, and all that stuff. But the hook is, or the bait and switch is, when people come for the radical honesty, for the honesty part, then he switches to working on people's minds. So him being a psychologist, or we still don't know whether he ever had a psychotherapist license. He said he calls himself a psychotherapist. I used to call him a psychotherapist because he told me so, but we don't have any evidence of him ever having had a license. But he has a background of psychology. So he was working with people's minds. And of course, in Dianetics, the mind is a recorder. So he would basically, the whole idea of that's what he himself has written in his emails, is that he uses radical honesty to control, to take charge of people's minds. So the problem is not you are not honest because you're thinking, because you have the untrustworthy reactive mind. And so what he does is destroy the reactive mind to come back to the senses, Fritz Perls' teachings. And when you constantly pay attention inside in your body, pay attention what's outside of your body, and then pay attention to what goes through your mind, those 3 categories of your experience, also Gestalt, that's when you're honest. So he basically has redefined honesty. The way you are naturally, the way you are authentically is not authentic. Brad tells you what's authentic, being the charismatic leader who tells you what the reality is. The reality is the Gestalt 3 categories of the experience. Okay. Yeah, and then he coaches you to basically use all kinds of exercises, not all kinds of. So the manipulation tactics are very simple, very basic. So he's not that smart, and he teaches also. His slogan is if anything's worth doing, it's worth doing it poorly. Or his mantra is duh. So being the dummy makes you more connected to your experience, makes you more authentic and more enlightened. So the whole point is to have an army of dummies right? It's like critical thinking. If you're using your critical thinking and if you're being smart, like I was smart, so he would have beef with me a lot because I was young, enthusiastic, naive, um, like slightly dissociated or like fawning a lot when faced with him, like in fear of him. And so I would, you know, kind of like have this like more like questions or critical remarks or something, and then I was the smart rat. And so he would punish people that are asking critical questions by labeling them as small rats, and then he would have tools for that. So like he would bring them. So I have a video of my recording because he would also use recordings of the life stories and naked work. That's another thing.
We'll get to
So
that. Yeah. Okay.
yeah,
Naked
so I
work.
have the
Wow.
recording where he's helping me to come back to my senses by asking, it's like, how do you know what's real? Like, how do you know what's real? How do you know what's reality? It's like implying that there is no way that I can know. So he keeps confusing me until I kind of like to lift the stress, kind of to induce the stress of like being confused, because he says that being confused is actually a good spot, which is something from therapy. It's there is an idea in therapy that when you're confused, you're kind of like better off. I don't know where that's coming from, but other have used that as well. So you get confused, and then you get the stress goes so high, then at some point you experience catharsis. So you're either have like a mental breakdown of like you're crying or
Right.
you are laughing, or I don't know, like if some people would shake, for example, some people would hyperventilate and they get all cramped. So, and that kind of Brad would call it peak experience, and then after that peak experience, the catharsis, in other places it's called, then Brad would be like, so how do you feel? Because the brain fries. And then the only thing that you're left to be aware with, which is just like heightened senses, so like buzzing in the body. And that's what he calls coming back to the senses. And he has established that as like the ultimate place where you want to be at all times. You're here and now, and you're connected with reality, like your heightened senses, that stress lifted, and like all this what is it like, yeah, I don't know the word, like that's the reality, that's you should seek it at all times. That's what
Right.
he also introduces the concept of the noticing being, which is very similar to Scientology. And thank you, Chris, for those videos, because your aha moments was also my aha moments, because Brad just copy pasted the whole thing from the
Yeah.
Scientology.
Yeah, you really did. Let me, if I might just make a couple comments just before I forget anything on this. There's a couple things you've said that are callbacks to an awful lot of kind of important points in terms of where Brad is drawing this work from. And the EST connection is invaluable. It's an invaluable connection to know about, because what you're describing is exactly what Werner Erhard would do in his initial seminars in the 1970s, is he would confront people on a group level, but then on an individual level too. He'd bring somebody up and, now I'm going to make an example out of you, and here we go. And you are lying, you are full of lies, you're a liar, liar, McLiar face, right? Your whole life is built on lies. And here we go, and I'm going to confront you with this, and I'm going to give you this, make you look at this horrible truth about yourself so that you will transform and change, right? And there's a lot more going on in this than just that, but I'm just talking about that one component, which Brad saw and went, yep, that's workable.
Yeah.
And the confusion thing, let me just before I forget about this too, the confusion thing is really interesting, because I don't know about anything that I'm I'm not a psychologist, I'm not a clinician, and I'm not a therapist, so I'm not pretending to be. But in all the things I have read in psychology, and I've read a lot, I've never heard anybody say being confused is a good place to be, and it's something to to induce. Confusion technique is something I have heard of, though, in Scientology and outside of it in hypnotism. It is a form of hypnotism. You get somebody confused, and when they are in a confused, and I mean really confused state, I'm not talking about just they have a question mark. It's like you really get somebody buzzing, and you introduce information to them when they are in that state, and they accept it unquestioningly. And it goes right in. You could say, straight to the lizard brain, however you want to describe it. It's not the best way to describe it, but it's a simple concept of you're uncritically accepting the information and conclusion. And then you often, because of the confusion, literally do not even remember being told that hypnotic command. It's just not even there. It's called the confusion technique, and Hubbard knew all about it. And I'm sure Warner did too. Erickson obviously did. He was the hypnotist guy. So this is not, this is not mysterious. This is not, but it's something a lot of people don't know, which is why I want to describe it right away here, that is what that is.
Great.
This is very pseudo therapeutic. Which was something we discussed on my coercive control program. It's a form of coercive control, is the pseudo-therapeutic cults or groups of the 1970s flourished with principles like this, like the confusion technique. So, and they framed it. We can go to Primal Scream, for example, another example of this kind of group intensive pseudo-therapeutic, so-called licensed trained therapists running the thing. Total disaster. Okay, so enough about all of that, but I just wanted to throw some context in there on that as to where Brad was drawing from. And obviously for my viewers, Brad quoting Dianetics and talking about the awful reactive mind. It was right on his website. I saw that and I just about fell out of my chair. Your awful reactive mind. Yeah, Brad is all about that. So he never mentions engrams that I'm aware of, or unconscious states. As far as relieving engrams, it's not a Dianetics thing. He just ripped off the language and utilizes it in his own model. His thing is not Dianetics. He's just cribbing from these people. So that's what I see, all right away in some of what you were describing there. How did Brad go from writing a book to forming up these groups? Do you know what the evolution of that was? Did he intend to, like with Hubbard, write a book and then I'm going to get a group, or was it just kind of by accident, or do you know?
So apparently he started his courses in honesty before the book. I think the book was the marketing strategy of the time. Okay. So you have a thing that you want to sell, like a transformation, and then the marketing, because there was no Facebook at the time. That's my generation. I used Facebook. But in his generation, that was write a book and get it published. And he would say that he wrote the book called Telling the Truth. And then his daughter, who was a teenager at the time, she read the book, or she looked at the book and she said, "That's nobody gonna buy it. Call it Radical Honesty." And voila, you have a brand name.
There you go.
Yeah. So, and that book got him. So as far as I know, Brad never really had a big following because he was very violent. He was very volatile and violent man. Probably Werner. So his groups were never more like 10, 12 people at the time, as far as I know. And I might be wrong because there's things that are unknown before the internet.
Sure.
And then he wrote the second book, which is basically what he did. He shared the workshop curriculum in that book. And then that's called the Practicing Radical Honesty, the workbook. And then basically what he said, and if at the end of the book, he writes, and if you want to learn the other exercises or other steps in this transformation, then you have to join my training, basically. So that was another marketing attempt. Also in the second book, he talked about fuck the dual relationships kind of stuff. So that means that book should have been the end of his psychotherapy license. Yeah. So
what does that, clarify that a little bit for me. What was he saying there?
something about the dual relationship doesn't make sense. It's just a bunch of systemites. He doesn't use the terminology, but he would think about those other people, like other Gestalt therapists. Something like it impedes freedom, and like the true hippie that he was like, free love for all kind of stuff. It's like like no awareness about the power dynamics, or he's like there might have been some benefit, but I've like there isn't really any benefit in having the separate roles, patient and the therapist. In his work, he discovered that dual relationship actually makes sense when there's like because he wanted to egalitarian egalitarian therapeutic community, and he said that the dual relationship can be thrown out of the window because in the group as long as everybody is honest and are telling the truth, then we're all equal in that space.
Oh boy. Yeah. I've heard that before. Yeah, that's again 60s, 70s encounter group stuff. Yeah. Okay, it's all kind of related, I guess I could say. I'm just going to say that much. Yeah. Anyway, okay, interesting. So he sort of throws out the whole concept of therapist and patient, and or that there's any sort of like power thing there. But then if it's all egalitarian, then how come he's still in charge? Like, how does that work?
Yeah, well, in his world, he's not in charge. He's like, well, your mind thinks that he's in charge, but the being in charge is just imaginary. You just imagine.
Oh, okay. Okay, I get it. Well, this smacks a little, in fact, a lot of a whole attitude that he seems to demonstrate and imbue into this culture of lack of responsibility or recognition of any kind of power dynamics. And yet he seems to have set up a system where he doesn't acknowledge that that's a reality, and yet it's very much a reality. And one that must not be ignored if you're going to dive into people's minds. Yeah. Because those are something people are influenced by in a great way. Who you're talking to and their position in the social or professional hierarchy has everything to do with your attitudes, emotions, feelings, and ideas about that person, and vice versa. And to just say, well, none of that matters that's fascinating. That's a silly thing to do. Anyway, okay, please continue. So he only had these small groups, and he's kind of pushing this egalitarian thing. But then groups do form, workshops, retreats. I mean, this whole thing does grow. How did that happen?
Okay, so just before I go to the growth part, I will regress a little bit to the past. What the Brad's attitude about this egalitarian therapeutic community is that it seems like Brad had no reservations about having sex, not even with his workshop participants or coach therapy clients, but also with patients, because there is a man my age, maybe a little bit older, who left. 2006 or so, Brad has he wanted to go to Congress. Like he established himself as a politician. He wanted to get into politics, and under the political ad interview video on YouTube, somebody left a comment, and that's how we know about this, because I also checked the facts. So apparently back in the day, Brad had sex with his patient or somebody's patient at a psychiatric clinic. And that woman got pregnant, had a baby, and the baby grew up in horrible conditions, lived on food stamps all his life. Brad, of course, said, "Fuck this shit, not my baby. I don't give a fuck." So he left that comment, and apparently it made impact because there are more people commenting. It's like, "Oh my God, I had no idea. This is horrible and still not acceptable for someone who wants to go to politics." So that now I see that this man, I found him on social media, and he is he has marked himself as a sibling of Brad's daughter and another son. So it seems like the story is not just gossip, but it's actually factual.
Right.
So that's the act, like that's like I just kind of want to like create the picture, like who's the mind behind the culture.
Yeah.
It's like the man who walks like a free agent, does whatever the fuck he wants, leaves a bunch of women behind him, had 5 marriages, kids all over the place. Yeah, it's that's the guy.
Well, and it seems too coincidental that he has developed a system of, well, I'll call it maybe initially subtle. I don't think eventually it's so subtle. Control, coercive control, but also a system of zero accountability or consequence. And then creates this system and says, well, this is enlightenment. This is personal transformation. This is how to be. And really, to kind of cut to the chase, this is a way of enabling all of that destructive narcissistic behavior and then saying it's all okay, right? Because hey, I'm being honest. I'm telling you what's up. So what's the problem? And from a narcissist point of view, from a predatory point of view, sorry, I don't mean to. The behavior smacks of narcissism. I can't say he's a narcissist. I can say he's a predatory personality based on everything I've seen about the guy, and I've gone down some rabbit holes on this. Of course, that's how he thinks. So in a way, he's being honest. But it's the worst kind of thing because it's really, you don't really quite get like the depths of what's going on when you first get involved in this. We bring an awful lot of assumptions into our relationships. And it's interesting to kind of think about that a little bit. Like we assume people are coming from a moral place. We assume people are coming from a compassionate place. It's an unwarranted assumption when you're dealing with a predator. But people will, and this is one of the reasons it takes so long to see them, because we're putting the assumptions there instead of just seeing what's right in front of us. But it's not always obvious from the get-go, right? It's a layered thing. Okay, so this thing kind of grows in what? Let's go back to that. How does this thing? We understand this is a character of questionable moral repute, and a background of well, not really honest. So, how does he grow this thing?
So I did my first retreat in 2014, when I was 23 years old. I'm laughing because I am the textbook example of who are the type of people who join cults. Like that was just that was the ground that I was, that was very typical. So I'm laughing about it every time I remember. But before I joined, so apparently he had some Europeans coming to his workshops in the US. And I think having that distance that that Americans who hang around him, they kind of see him for who he is and they leave. There's like the growth in the US never happened. What happened was the boom in Europe. Was some of Europeans came to the US and then they brought Brad to Greece. So he was doing once a year a retreat in Greece. And so more and more Europeans started to flock. The rich Germans, Swiss, the riches of that kind of type of people. And so is there something that I want to share? There's also he wanted to be an opera show, or he was invited to attend opera show like maybe 2007, maybe 2008 or something. And he would have gone into opera show, but then the last minute she canceled, like her team canceled because of the naked work. So and then Brad would say, well, opera just can't handle it because of her own issues with her own body image.
Oh, of course he would say that.
Yeah, of course.
Of
Yeah.
course he would.
So,
He would never even stop to think, maybe there's something about this naked work. I don't know. Maybe I should question myself about that. No, no. No, that thought's never happening in a mind like that. So
he was saying that because of this Oprah show, he prepared for it by buying 10,000 copies of his book, or many copies for his book. He had to buy it. But I don't buy it. Now that I've learned about the marketing techniques back in the day, it's more likely that in order to become a bestseller, you have to have 10,000 purchases.
right.
And doesn't matter where those purchases come from. It can be one person buying 10,000 copies and become bestseller, and that's how you have a bestseller book that people flock to.
Gee, I wouldn't know anything about that with the New York Times best-selling Dianetics and Scientology and Hubbard fiction books, or
Really?
the fact that Scientologists were going and buying boxes and boxes of books at a time to pump up the numbers in the 80s. No, there's no history of that in Scientology at all. So,
Okay.
yeah, Brad, again, taking a page from,
Yeah.
I don't want to say us because I'm not part of that anymore, but that my former group, right? Yeah, how interesting. And then says it was, and then offers an explanation or says this as though he was doing it for Oprah's show, which actually, if you just wait a minute, why? What? Why were you do? What? Why would you do that? How does that make any sense at all? It doesn't make any sense. It's anyway.
Mm-hmm.
That's funny.
So
okay.
yeah, and so what happened is that he kept gifting the copies of his book to people, and then he would just give 5. It's like bring to Europe and share it with people who are to be radically honest, because not everyone is ready to be radically honest. Duh.
Right.
And so from the European perspective, because the internet wasn't really the kind of place that it is now, it was really difficult to find information. You would really need to dig, and I didn't even check anything about radical honesty at the time. So from the European perspective, you have a psychotherapist, he was in the civil rights movement, who positions himself as a respected psychotherapist who was fighting against the American system for the rights of all people. Who has written a book that's bestseller, and he has written has written 7 books in total, which is he's a writer. And he comes
this is right out of Hubbard, man. This is just I am the modern L. Ron Hubbard. Wow, this guy. This is exactly how Hubbard got into Europe. So
wow.
So that's why I'm sitting here. We've never talked about this, but this is exactly how Hubbard got into Europe. So in the 1950s. So I'm just sitting here going, yeah, but just check off all the boxes, Brad. Just keep going.
That is so interesting, because they're in the development of the group. Also, you gave me feedback that has happened also in Scientology, and that was oh, so it's not just in radical honesty. It also it's even the way cult members, even the way people in that group develop or move towards the directions is already pre-directed for them.
That's right.
Interesting, fascinating.
Yeah, people. I don't ever mean to say that people are simple. They're not, but people do have patterns, and predators watch patterns, and especially those who rise up to, running groups or wanting to control groups of people at a time, or gain from, the money, the sex, the finance, all the stuff that they get from the group. They watch those patterns very, very closely because people respond, and the point you made about the lack of close, continuous connection with him was absolutely beautiful. That is absolutely the key difference.
Mm-hmm.
Same with Hubbard. He would fly over to Europe, do a week, go back to America.
Yeah.
Yeah. Limited exposure.
Yeah. And so in 2017, I just hop a few years, maybe we can go back to in some other episodes of this. In 2017, there was a trainer's training. Brad would lead a trainer's training maybe once every year or every second year in the US. And so he did a trainer's training in 2017 in Miami, and I went there because I felt ready. Like I felt like I'm like a ninja. Back in Berlin, I already have established my own radical honesty meetup. Was also immersed in other culty groups at the time. So I was like continuously brainwashed on that side, which actually, now that I look at it, it's very similar. So like it's textbook brainwashing tactics I was getting from other groups and also in radical honesty. So I was kind of like hopping cults without knowing that those are cults. It's just like normal alternative culture at the time. That's what I thought.
Right.
So in 2017, Brad kind of invited everyone, and he's I think at the time he was 72 or maybe 82. I don't remember. Like he's old. He's already should be retired. And he said that he's gonna the standard to get certified for this trainer's training is so low that you have to be like a complete like he said that like he humiliated those who could be potentially certified. He used that, at least with me or with others, quite a lot. So he would humiliate people, kind of like push them down to be the one who can lift them up. So he would be like if you get certified here, it's like it doesn't mean anything, right? Because it's like the standard is so low already. So you have to be like nobody to get certified, that kind of stuff. And I was really offended because like I've spent years preparing for this. I read in his book about what it means to be present. And I really feel like I deserve to be present. And when I arrived there, it's a fucking shit show.
Tell me,
So
what happened?
I was like a scared frozen puppy. Like there was a time I couldn't even speak. I was that frightened and frozen.
Wow.
But I did not know about the freeze flight fight responses, right? So I had no idea. Like I was just like, what the fuck is wrong with me? Like, why can't I finish a sentence? Like I am such a strong, independent, powerful woman. I was 26 at the time. I was like, why can't I be me? Like, what's wrong with me? I was like constantly like punishing myself for not being able to like function how I normally function. I was very social and very like the reason why I joined Radical Honesty is for the honesty part, right? It's like I was very authentic and I was like I got this. And when I was there, I was completely shut down. I remember myself crying in the bathroom, not understanding what the fuck is going on with me. The people around me were just like, when I think about it, a bunch of losers. Like when I think about it now, it's like really, really weird, strange characters, not your like strange people. And you know, the core of radical honesty is that resentment is a love language. That's another way to like redefine the reality. So
resentment is a love language?
yeah. You're
Oh
welcome.
man,
You're
there's a
like,
lot to unpack right there. Okay, but please continue. I do not want to interrupt you right now. Carry on.
okay. So so the way that radical honesty, the process is a technical word. When we're processing emotions, when there's triggers, we process those triggers, confront each other, probably be the vocabulary that you would use. But we have an honest conversation, which consists of two sentences. I appreciate you for, and I resent you for. So Brad said that in any given moment, Gestalt, you can be aware of your sensations. And if, for example, you're sad, that means that you're angry. That means that you have to resent someone. Whenever you like someone, that means that you appreciate them, and you have to appreciate them also to get over that experience. So the process is when you are saying, I, for example, would feel tension in my chest. I was like, I notice I tension in my chest, and I imagine like you don't like me. I resent you for something that I see about your face that I interpret as not liking me. So I would say like, I resent you for your lips, for example, if they're tensed. It's like, I imagine they're tensed. And then I would get the, you know, like now I know the biology behind it, but at the time it felt like magic. Whereas like, get this like really, really scared of saying it. And then I would say it, and then I would have the release, and then I would not think, I would not have any more judgments left because my brain was fried at the time. And I would be like, okay, I'm done. And because that behavior was reinforced, so whenever I would do it the right way, whenever I would use the right language, the 3 taboos, I can also mention it later. So I would be rewarded, or like that's like good work. And so then I think that it just became self-persuasion of just kind of persuading myself that I got over it now because I did the right thing.
Right.
But I don't, like, there was a point where the mind control that works is that I had to be in charge of where my attention goes. So this is the mind control technique where the attention always goes in the 3 categories of the experience, therefore, and never to the mind, because the mind is the bad, reactive, untrustworthy. So I would had to constantly bring my attention to my body and feel my body. And that's how I would control myself to like feel and think and whatever.
Right.
And so the process is that you resent and appreciate each other. And that's what Brad would call, now you feel connection, when you have the buzzing in the body and the sweat and the tears come down. And like when when the sensations or the trigger or the thoughts or the sensations recede, then this is called present, you're being present. Yeah, so there are lots of people who were just like acting erratic, saying the most outrageous things, men on purpose triggering women with the sexual content. We're just like, because to provoke someone is equals to give them an opportunity to get over themselves. So you give them an opportunity to get radical honesty. Mm-hmm.
That's where we start going into line crossing, right? Because there's things you can do with people that create feelings and create attitudes or emotions in them, and there's not an inherent good or bad in that. It's what you do with it, right? And how you treat it and how you deal with the person in front of you. Is it respectful or is it judgmental? And there's an awful lot of judgment going on in this group, which makes it not so therapeutic, to say the least, just in what you've described so far. But I want to be clear that these techniques are, it's a piecemeal bit of this and that and this and that he's putting together here. And yes, you will create effects in people, but like I always say, it's the interpretation of those effects where the power lies, right? Yeah. Just because you can get a rise out of somebody doesn't mean you have done something good for them, but it doesn't necessarily mean you've done something bad for them either. It's all a matter of what you do with it, and if you're triggering people sexually in order to try to get in their pants, that's not what any of this should be about, right? As an example, as a classic example. Yeah. That's my only commentary so far. I don't, we could talk all day about breaking these techniques apart, but that's not the point of our talk today. So please, but the effects it was having on you is the point of our talk today. So please continue with that weekend, with that training. That sounds very interesting to me.
Yeah. So I was like, now that I look back, I think I was completely overwhelmed. And I think many people have been overwhelmed. There are so many people who would share later on the email years to come. It's like, I don't remember much from the training, or I was completely overwhelmed, or I was completely wreckaged,
Yes.
So it's like somebody that you interviewed about Easter, who said, Dave Budakian, he said, it's not a bug, it's a feature. To overwhelm people is a feature of the cult. That's how they get persuaded, and
that's right.
Seeking this similar experiences.
That's right.
So
let me just jump to this one real fast. Just because it's kind of hanging out there, and I'm still kind of curious about it myself. What is this naked work?
Okay.
Just since we like kind of put it out there and then we haven't really gotten, it's kind of like what
Yeah.
people get naked during this? What?
Yeah. So, where do I begin? Um, Naked work. So it's an every 8-day intensive. People do naked work, and it's presented as something to help you get over your shame or whatever the mind judges about your body or your sexual history, so that you wouldn't have that many taboos, or that you would like eventually feel free with your body. Um, After we left, my friend she said that, I spoke with my father, who's also an older man, an older rich man, and when she told him that there's a naked work, that her father would say, sounds like an old man could think of this, like sounds like an old man would want something like that in his field. It's like, of course, like if you're old and there are a bunch of young people coming, and it's like it's a ground for mating. It's like a woman who doesn't feel shame about her sexuality is a woman who is open to fuck. So
That's right. And there is no way that wasn't premeditated. There is 0% chance that is not premeditated. Sorry,
yeah.
but it's just always that way. How interesting. Okay, so that's just a part of this thing, is that you strip and you're doing all the stuff, but you're naked. And
Yeah,
everybody's
and you're
being
being
naked.
filmed.
What's that?
And you're being filmed.
And you're being filmed?
I know. Yeah.
Oh dear. Oh
I'm not
dear.
I'm not aware of it ever being used as collateral. I wouldn't be
Okay.
afraid that being used against me in the future, but I know that some women especially have expressed fear of speaking out, because some of the trainers or Brad or somebody else could have kept those videos.
Yes.
Right. They would say like,
Yes.
yeah, we deleted it because it's not sexual, blah, blah, blah. But like, it's like there are creepy guys out there. So we know, like, have you met a man? I met them.
Well, and we might get to this today, but this has been a bit of a um, this whole movement has been a bit of an invitational to to sexually predatory personalities. That seems to have been the case from a couple examples that I've heard about and read about from survivors of this group. So okay. Tell
Yeah.
me, was this thing you went to in Miami? Was this an 8-day thing?
So Brad, the way he was doing his trainer's training, he wasn't really smart or original, and he wasn't really putting any much effort because of his premise of being in this world, right? It's like you have to be here and now, present, and do everything poorly, doobie doobie doo, as he would say. So he was just doing an A-day that he would call a trainer's training.
Okay.
So it's an 8-day intensive that would have him voting on people at the end of the 8-day based on however he feels. He has a history of certifying women that he felt attracted to. Now, in that training in 2017, he certified many, many people. I was very conflicted because I felt like these guys are radical consent trainers now. It's like they have no experience working with people. They're like lying. They're full of shit. It's like, what the fuck is this? I was having cognitive dissonance, but I kept choosing radical honesty. Like, no, there must be something that I'm just not getting. Plus, I'm so out of myself in this training. It's like something is definitely wrong with me. Um, but so when those, I think maybe 12 people got certified to be trainers, or maybe even more, like maybe 14, but some of them didn't even work with people or didn't want to be like they didn't want to work as a radical trainer, but they wanted to be like, to have this a status game, right? So to get the status. And so when in the next trainer's training, when Brad kind of like, he was like, okay, so looking back, it seems that Brad was looking for people to sell his business to. And so he certified a group of idiots, like people who are not that smart, like people who are under his spell, under his control, who were so eager to bring radical honesty to wherever they came from, which is mostly Europe, the rich part of Europe. So for Brad, it was just a matter of convenience. And so he like he would sell this idea about really we need to take over, like we need to bring radical honesty into the world, we need to take over the world. And he would also joke about it, you know, it's like we're a cult that's going to take over the world. He was the kind of guy who would be brutally honest to normalize whatever he was saying, right? So he would joke about being a cult. So for us, we're like, haha, we're cult members, haha, like what a joke, because we can't, there was no critical thinking allowed to read what is a cult. Like we thought that we're just a better version of a cult. It's like cult is great, like in Nexium, you know, like Sarah would be like who wouldn't want to join this our cult where, you know, there's like so many benefits to so many people. It's great.
That's right.
So the same
I used to say the exact same thing in Scientology. That's so funny. I would embrace it. I embrace the term. Now, no, this was not a dogmatic thing. We weren't told to do this institutionally. We would always say, we're not a cult. We're not a cult. But personally, me out on the front lines dealing with people, I'd be like, hell yeah, we are. And if you look up the dictionary definition of it, so's the Catholic Church. Woo! So I could just write it off. You could throw that word at me all day long when I was a Scientologist, and I just didn't care. I totally get where you're coming from on that. Yeah. It's a funny reversal that we do when we're in the glow of it, when we're in the emotion of it, and there is no critical thinking going on, you know. And it's funny how when the transformation hits us of starting to question what's going on, suddenly all of the joking is, oh no, wait. You know, and it becomes all too real. So
yeah.
Anyway, please continue. But with this training, so you were seeing things happening that were like,
yeah. So after the training, I did not get certified. And
oh, you did not?
No.
Okay.
I mean, I wasn't even able to speak. That's like
right.
Like, you can't really be a trainer if you can't speak.
Yeah, you were a little overwhelmed.
Oh, I was out of myself.
Yeah. Yeah. Would you say the other folks there were too in different ways?
Yeah, in different ways, definitely. I think there was like really a spectrum of how much and what people could take, and how, because also others have been repeaters. So this was not their first trainer's training. There was a second or third trainer's training. So obviously it's like, when if you've been in this space, you're more adjusted, it's more comfortable. Whereas for me, it was the first time. And for a few others, it was also the first time. And also the voting was like, hey, I like you. Do you like this guy? And it's like, yeah, we like this guy. It's like based on bias, you know, it's like, we like him. That's why he's going to be a trainer. And not like nobody knew me. So yeah.
Understood. Let me ask you a couple questions about this. So it was an 8-day process. You show up in Miami. This is at a hotel, or where is this being held at?
They rented an Airbnb, like a villa in Miami, in the Hollywood. Is not the Hollywood. No, there's like a famous street in Miami, something.
Okay. And so y'all were at sort of a private location.
Yeah.
Okay.
Sleeping several people in the same room.
Oh, okay. Did you stay there the whole time?
Yeah.
Okay. So you never went out to the grocery store or to tourist attractions or stuff like that?
I went on foot to the beach, and that was a mistake because you shouldn't be walking in the US, apparently. I went for a walk once, but then once I came back, Brad immediately was like, you know, we missed you today. Where were you?
Right.
There was immediately of some sort of like sense of like, well, now I'm paying attention to you. It's like, what's wrong with you? Why didn't you tell anybody that you're leaving?
So. Right. Remember, folks, isolation, manipulation, control. Those are your 3 elements of coercive control. Isolation, right? Okay, but not to get all nefarious, people can go off and do things by themselves all the time or in groups. I'm not saying it's always awful, but we have a context here. So 8 days, pretty solid. You're in a pretty overwhelmed state the whole time that you're there. You're sleeping there, eating there. Were people having sex there?
Yeah.
Okay.
Group sex was very popular. And Brad would also, now that we know that Brad would proposition himself in every workshop, there were other, the senior trainer, Tibor Shadburn, we also know that he would proposition on participants in probably every workshop. So that was the hunting ground,
Right.
both for Brad and for Tabor, but also probably for other men, because it's like it's free for all. It's like we're all equal, so why not?
Right. Well, as you mentioned, this wasn't the first time. This wasn't everyone's first rodeo. There were people there for a second, third shot. Which of course makes it imperative that that to pretend that this is therapy, that Brad must be equal with everybody else, because if he is senior or in a senior authoritarian position, which he automatically is, but he has to pretend he's not so that he can engage in this behavior. Wow, that's all bad enough. When did the naked thing happen?
It's usually on the 5th or 6th day out of the 8 days.
And that's kind of like a whole day thing,
So
or that carries on for a while?
yeah, it's the whole.
Okay. And was there an agreement you had to sign at the beginning that Brad was in charge and you had to do everything he said?
I don't remember. That was the agreements. There are always agreements at the end of the workshop. The agreements are actually non-negotiables that you have to agree. Otherwise, you have to get out and you will not get your refund. And he gave us a liability waiver to sign, which I did not understand, because at the time my English skills I signed it without knowing what a liability waiver is. But I knew that to be there, I have to sign it, so I signed it. And also one of the agreements, which it's never used in other radical institute workshops, but he uses it for trainers training, which is I agreed to practice radical honesty for the rest of my life, which is something that you had probably in Scientology, and you had the million-year contract and the radical
we have
honesty.
The billion-year contract, yeah.
The billion-year.
Good times all around. All right. Wow. Yeah, this is really bad. Okay.
We're just halfway through.
Yeah, please continue. If there's more to tell me about this intensive, I'd like to know more about it. I just had a couple of those questions. I don't want to. Is there anything more we should know about that particular event?
So I think that if we're speaking about what effect it had on me, instead of flying back to Germany where I used to live, I flew down to Mexico, to Tulum, because I got depressed. And back in Germany, it was winter, and winter in Berlin is really horrible. It's like literally really, really bad place to be in winter. So I went down south and I spent 6 weeks in a bunk bed, in the hostel, reading Brad's book, trying to understand what the fuck went wrong with me.
Right. Oh, that was the question I had. What was the differential experience between what you had been doing for 3 years in Europe versus what you encountered with Brad directly? Because indirectly, I'm imagining that it was a calmer, more rational version that people had rolled out of this. So then you go see the source of this and it's off the charts, right? With control and overbearing invalidation and confusion and various things. So this was was this a different experience from what you had been doing for 3 years?
Yeah, that's actually a really good point. That what I was doing for 3 years before, we were another trainer, the senior trainer, who is the opposite. We would call him the opposite of Brad. He's very gentle, very silent. He's this zazen, kind of like a monk, like he calls himself Tabor G, like a guru, you know, he's very like humble, but slay as fuck. So he would come to Europe, and because he was very, very desperate to kind of like spread his work, which he called the revolutionary relating, he was very nice and he would agree with everything. He was like, he would not push back. He's like, well, I would like you to, like, I would like to make money, but if you're doing all the art organizing and bringing people, then I'm happy to, like, you know, split the profit and all that stuff. So I was so eager because I thought that radical honesty is like something that, you know, about honesty and all that. I was so eager. I was just like, I'm going to work with you. I'm going to work for you. We're going to, you know, spread this thing. It's going to be amazing. We're going to live in an honest world, an honest community. Yeah, that. So because he was desperate, he kind of like was very moldable. Like he was very flexible. He was the complete opposite from Brad. Yeah. So
Okay. So that had been a kinder, gentler version of this whole thing, which was more palatable, which was more thoughtful, which was more thought provoking. And you were able to take the principles and go, okay, well, how can I use this perhaps more, you know, constructively, right? Or how can I use this? And it was being done, you know, positive, positive, positive. So yeah, you go out to Miami and it must have been an ice water dip.
Yeah, and then I was depressed and suicidal. So,
oh my goodness.
Mm-hmm.
Not at all. It doesn't, people, let me just say that anybody who might be judging just from that statement right there, you shouldn't be, first off. And second off, you might be surprised, and I do have a little bit of direct experience with this. You might be surprised how little it can take sometimes to overwhelm somebody or draw them or drive them to places. And when you have days to work on someone, that's more than enough time. When you have all day, every day for an intensive, as they say, period of time, you can do a lot. So yeah. Okay. Wow.
Mm-hmm.
So you sort of were recovering in Mexico.
It seems like it, yeah. But I was still psychologically very fragmented. So psychologically, still like taking 100% responsibility, the radical responsibility, the one that you weaponize against someone. So I was doing that. And I was also like, you know, like daily overwhelmed. So I would walk on streets and I would like it seemed like the light would flicker. It's like I would get tired a lot. So I like was physically unwell as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then I went down. I had some friends from traveling times, and I went down and took drugs with them in Guatemala, and then I hitchhiked to Costa Rica, and I met the guy with whom I hooked up at the trainer's training, um, which was a completely different vibe out of the workshop. Very different vibe. It was like he was silent, not honest, not direct at all, and I was just like scared and just like, what the fuck's going on?
Wow.
Yeah,
Interesting.
I was very adventurous. I was very courageous. Like as a person, I was very social. I would go places, meet people. Yeah, was very, very active. And I was at the time, I was also very, very like unstable physically as well and psychologically. Yeah. And then because Tabor was arriving to Europe. Then I went to Berlin to organize workshops for him and decided that I will only work with Tabor because Tabor was great. He was gentle. It was radical honesty was about compassion. It's something that I don't know whether it's something that it's planted thought, or is it like it's something that I really thought. There's like I have never treated myself with compassion, for example. And I don't know whether it's true, right? It's like a lot of the things that I've got the insights about, I don't know whether that was planted or whether that was actually true.
Sure.
Yeah. And so the next trainer's training in 2018, then Brad and Tabor came to Italy, and then Tabor basically was leading and Brad was just chilling and sitting, correcting Tabor.
Okay.
It's like, no, not like that. It's like, and then he would correct what the reality is. And
How
that's
did,
when
oh, sorry, go ahead.
what
Sorry.
I wanted to say about those people who got certified 2017 started to be involved in the business. There was no business. And now that I look back, there was no business. Brad were like, take over my business. And when they got in, there's like working and all the time. It's like there is no business. They're building the business for him. But then also we're the ones who started to so in the certification process, Brad could not just certify whoever he was attracted to. They started to kind of like demand for some standards. And so that trainer training in 2018 was something that was already more tangible, but still very, very like spiritual, and it's like the Lulu La La Land. So
Got it. Okay, got it. And was that another of those 8-day deals?
yeah.
And did Tabor and Brad run it similarly to what had happened in Miami? Did similar things happen, or was it a calmer, kinder, gentler version of what
It
happened
was
in
calmer,
Miami?
gentler. It was calmer, gentler version. Tabor complained about the fact that he's not getting paid because, of course, Brad is exploiting everyone that everyone who's working for him, because he's not working for anybody. He's just like a star sitting there and telling people what is. And so
Right.
Tabor about the fact that he's not getting paid, and Tabor was doing most of the work. And the work was that it was half us doing so we would be practicing teaching those exercises, and the participants, the trainees were who you would practice on. So it was kind of like sort of similar to how normal training would look like.
Sure.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so it was very different. But what kept coming, so like there were male participants especially. So for example, there was a male participant who has a history of sexually abusing children or watching sexual exploitation of children content, or going to the developing country to exploit or sex workers, for example. And so there was always something that would come up that was very, very triggering, because there were actual fucking predators and, borderline criminals attending and sharing the truth about their experience, and sobbing about how guilty he feels about having done what he have done. And then of course everybody would have to get over themselves, so resent him and get over the trigger, so you wouldn't be mad at him for exploiting children, for example, or watching the content. And by children,
Wow.
the
Wow.
underage
That's a
prostitutes. And
big ask. That's a
yeah.
big ask to put a bunch of people in a room and be okay with some guy who's into that. Wow.
Mhm.
That's too much. That's way too much. And there's no way that's how that kind of personality should be being dealt with.
So
My goodness.
because in order to be a trainer, you would have to be able to get over everything, right? So you
Yeah.
cannot be triggered by people at all.
Mm-hmm.
So I was constantly triggered by him, and I was crying to Tabor, and I was like, Tabor, how do I get over this? And Tabor said, well, maybe he just reminds you something from your childhood.
Sure.
Yeah,
Right.
that's and then again, it's like digging in my childhood memories, thinking
Right.
like what could have happened in my childhood, instead of just naming the fact that we need to call the police.
Well, exactly. And this is kind of maybe the best example we've come up with so far here, because when you are confronted with somebody who is exploiting and preying upon children, whether through video or whether in real life, these are crimes. These are major crimes, and they're not major crimes for no reason. In any context, anywhere, anytime. There's never a time when this is okay. And to be met with, to go to the responsible authority figure, whether it's Brad Tabor or anybody in any context, there are some things that are kind of like always true. And this would be, I'm just going to say that my opinion, and this would be one of them when it comes to abusing kids. And to then be told by the authority figures, yeah, that sounds like a you problem. Yeah, that's it. That's you. You're the one who has the problem here. Right? He's being honest. What's the problem? I mean, if the sexual predation of adult women isn't bad enough, this should very much highlight why we have a problem with this. Because this is not radical honesty. This is radical illegality and predation. Just don't know any other words to use for that. Sorry, but I just don't. Okay. Anyway, sorry, I had to offer some commentary on that. So that was your experience in 2018. Did you become a trainer at that point?
Also, no, because I couldn't get over my obsession about this guy being a fucking sexual predator and, unreported criminal, basically. And also the fact that person was my friend. Like, I really considered, so in all workshops, we would get very close with each other, right? Yeah. So like these were I at some point would call, these are my family, these are my friends. We would get very close with each other. So to know that this guy, yeah, it was just like very heartbreaking. There's like all kinds of layers were going on, and I did not get certified. Yeah.
Right. As though the certification means anything anyway. I was just curious. It's not, it's like going clear, it's like, okay, whatever. Like, great. I got a piece of paper. It says I don't have a reactive mind anymore. Guess what? I never did, Exactly. So yeah. Okay. So I think we've painted a pretty clear picture here of at least some of the major problems with this as a group activity, and with Brad specifically as the leader of this activity and where he's drawing from. I think we've got a pretty good idea of that. So let me ask you this. This must have been a point. I speak often about, I don't know that it's 100% required 100% of the time. In fact, of course it's not. But I will say that I think a majority of the time, the thing that wakes people up, or that moment that we talk about, is a moment of moral clarity. It's a moment of a moral offense so great or so big that you can't, cognitive dissonance, you can't explain it away. It's undeniable and irrefutable are the words that I use, right? It's just, there it is, and it can't be denied. That happened for me, and my point was, realizing it was lying. I was lying all the time, and once that became clear, I couldn't unsee it. It wasn't the biggest problem in Scientology, but it was the thing that was most real to me, that made me go, wait a second, and that's what started the process. You don't have to have had that experience, but I'm curious, what was it that woke you up or got you on that questioning path?
So it took me several abuses to kind of be like, oh, this is like, to kind of be like, I can't get over this. This is not getting over ist thing. Right. And the fact that I felt so authentic when I was righteous about righteousness is also a bad thing, right? So you don't want to be righteous. If you're righteous, then you're invalid.
I see.
It's like I couldn't get over myself. The righteousness felt very authentic. And I felt like, if this is really about radical honesty, if this is really about authenticity, that I am the most authentic as I've ever been after going through these abuses, it's like, why are everybody in the Radical Honesty Institute are shunning me now? Like, what is this about? And then I've learned that I'm not the only one. And I wonder how much of the abuses I want to get into, because, yeah.
You are like perfectly free to share whatever.
The culture that I have spoke about in an hour and 20 minutes, that has persisted and it has went down the hierarchy. Okay. And so relationships got broken, and people got just like the bait and switch were in every relationships by the, there were also male predators, but also female predators as well. So it's like the culture of no accountability has birthed a group that, was just I had to go through I wasn't the receiving end of the abuse. And that was something that completely flipped me, where I was so stressed that I couldn't eat or sleep. And so, and I couldn't also attach, like, because I thought that what's holding me connected to, like, what's holding me in the group is the emotional attachments that I have developed over the years with the trainers, with the owners. Those people who got certified in 2017, they became the board, the owners, right? So my bosses technically, but we were all equal at the time. Just like I did not perceive that, these are my friends. But I also, because of this huge violation of trust and betrayal by this sexually predatory guy at the Institute, I was just like closed off, and again was suicidal, depressed. Like I was just really, really shocked, and I did not know what to do. And the only help that I got from my friends, the owners of the Institute, was get over it. That just resent him louder, just scream at him, punch the wall, like do something, but get over yourself. And I was like, I cannot. Like this is like he did this on purpose. He knew what not to do, and he did it on purpose to punish me and to trap me, to gain status and financial things from me. It's like that he shouldn't be at the Institute because he has a history of lying. And everybody was like, no, 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 no. It's like, you have to get over it. Like they kept focused on my emotional outburst and not on the fact of predatory pattern.
Right.
And so that was what the shelf for me. Like I had to be abused to the point where I couldn't function, didn't want to live, was just like completely at the mental breakdown, probably.
Got it.
And again, instead of going back to Europe, I went to Maggie's place in Denver.
You came here.
Exactly.
Okay.
Because back in Europe, the only way to go back was the predatory guy who like hold my stuff and my documents, and I was like, I don't want to, like, I will probably faint if I see him. So I was like, I got the money. I'm flying to the US, and Maggie again is like, come to my place. This is amazing. And Maggie is one of the owners of Radical Institute, which only clicked to me way, way later what that means actually. So I was at Maggie's place where I, was kind of recovering, and Maggie was really sweet. And again, like the emotional bonds that I had with people in Radical Honesty were really strong. I felt cared for, seen. She gave me plenty of space. Like she really took care of me and took me in, and it was really good for me. But then when I started to report the predatory guy, then she's like, well, you used too many judgments in your description. You should have known better. Like, better than judge him so much, that kind of stuff. And I was like, again, confused. It's like, this doesn't make sense. Like they're providing a service of support circle. The Radical Honesty Institute is providing a service. Like this shouldn't, like the way I express myself shouldn't be affecting the service that they provide.
Let me ask you a question just to throw a little bit more context onto this thing.
Yeah.
Conceivably speaking, somebody could have come to this same individual could have come to that seminar, could have come to that training and said, I killed somebody yesterday.
Yeah.
And your inability to get over that. I killed my mother in cold blood yesterday. Used a knife, describe the whole thing, right? And your inability to deal with that is a you problem.
Correct.
Like we're talking that level of.
Correct.
And no matter who you're talking to in this organization, they keep telling you it sounds like a you problem.
Yeah.
And we're talking about actual prosecutable crimes. We're not talking about some distant past. I'm over it now. It's all great. We're not talking about that. And even if we were, it's still questionable as fuck. But They just did it. Unapologetically, honestly. I mean, no wonder you are in. I mean, Jesus, moral offense doesn't even begin, well, it does begin to describe this, but this is outrageous. My goodness. So even when you are being met with true compassion and emotional connection, you're still being given the stonewall on, yeah, we're not going to do anything about this guy. Wow. I just wanted to be like super clear about that because I want to make sure I was understanding the situation. This is horrible.
Yeah. So
I
just
can
for
see the
clarity,
conflict.
for the liability's sake, I just don't want to compare what the guy did to the murder. I have never participated in a workshop or led a workshop where somebody admitted to murdering someone, but there has been
Oh, no, of
crimes
course.
made.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
So
I was
there
just
are
throwing that out there for
examples.
my clarity
Yeah.
to be clear on the fact that we're talking about a severe act,
Yeah. Correct.
right? Recently committed, openly stated, and
Mhm.
nobody's going to do anything about it. I guess that's the only reason I went there.
Yeah. So it is true. And for what happens is that especially if a trainer shares something very vulnerable, like I used to beat the dog of my ex-girlfriend, for example,
Sure.
and now I regret it and I'm so sorry. And there's like people go like, oh my God, he's so honest. It's like, thank you so much. I appreciate you for sharing. It takes so much courage to share in a group about such an awful thing. And then he would be like, and I stole when I was back in the day, I stole this from someone. And people are like, oh my God, it's so courageous of you to be in the position of power and share this, yada yada. So anytime somebody would share, there was only one time when I heard that someone in London was leading a meetup, which is not a radicalcy trainer. So a student, so someone who's in the periphery, someone who hasn't really got into the cult, didn't really get sucked in and doesn't really see what's going on. But in his meetup, someone shared also something about the children's sexual exploitation content sharing and watching or something or making. I don't remember. And one of the participants of the meetup reported him to the police. And so what happened to that student confronted the participant who reported the predator. It's like, why didn't you just resented him and got over yourself? Like, why did you have to bring it to the police? So that's the culture in general. It's impunity, basically. It's like once I have left the institute, I still had 4 retreats to do. And when I left, I did not really see everything. So it took me another 6 months to be like, oh, so that's how we brainwash. Like cults are actually about brainwashing. Like what? So it was a gradual waking up. And on my last retreat, again, somebody from the institute, because everyone is in that culture, did something predatory. But this time, me and my co-trainer, who like I was already, I don't know, I was like already out, but he was still in because he's one of the owners. So he was still very much, needing to justify, explain to himself and be consistent. But that was the first time when we did not just justify and explain it away. The participants were like, we need consequences. Like, we don't trust this guy. This is your assistant. It's your company. Like, you have to do something about it. And that was the first time when me and my co-trainer, we introduced that concept of consequences. We have never in my 9 years of experience in radical honesty have never even thought about consequences, thanks to the participants who were mature grown-up adults, have been working activists and working with abuse victims recovery. So they're really good people. Thanks to them, their persistence, and they're like, we can't get over this. You have to enforce something, some kind of punishment. And so that was the very first time I said, consequences? What would that, like, what's consequences? How would that look like? And eventually we did punish, like we issued the consequences, which was apparently very traumatic to the guy because he has witnessed all his life on the Radical Honesty Institute other people breaking agreements, doing the fuck they want and getting away with it. The worst thing that could happen, a bunch of people resent him and get over it. And he was for the first time punished. And that was very traumatic. It was like he felt very rejected and, all that kind of stuff. So yeah, that's the history of consequences in Radical Honesty.
Yeah, no, and I'm glad that it came to that, because that's exactly the core problem, you could say, with the entire concept of the radical honesty is not that you're being honest, it's that there's no consequences for that honesty, and human nature doesn't allow for that. Our emotional needs don't allow for that. We have an inherent need. There is a life need for tit for tat. When you do something harmful to people, there must be consequences. And if there are not, that's how social hierarchies break down. That's not how they're created or strengthened. So reciprocity is important in the world, in other words. All right. Anyway, just to get off my soapbox for a second, but damn, it's just, man, it's these crazy kids, like, come on. Okay. So you are now totally out of this.
I am. Yeah.
Okay. How long? I'm sorry?
Now it's 2.5 years past.
Okay. And how has your, dare we say, recovery gone with this?
Horrible. It's been really horrible. I mean, it's been really, really tough. I did not know how taxing it will be. I had no idea what I was dealing with. I thought that it's gonna be like a quick recovery and it's like maybe a year tops, 2 years tops. I'm just gonna get over myself and be back normal and run workshops and give interviews and be the star that that built me up, that Radical Honesty Institute kind of built me up to be the recruiter for the cult. I was really good at it, by the way. I was Sarah Edmondson of Radical Honesty Institute. Yeah, it was really, really like the first year I was terrified to the point where I was having physical chest pains, nightmares. A bunch of psychological conditions got diagnosed. Post-traumatic stress, one of them. Then yeah, it was just like, who am I? Like, once I have this idea of like, oh, so this is what I could do, then I learned, oh, it's just another cult stuff. Like everything that I built my identity on as like in the 20s are the years where I'm like building an identity about who I am as a professional, as an adult, like that kind of like pulled completely. And I was just like in the air flying. I was like, what the fuck is going on? Yeah. Like, where am I? Who am I? What's the point? Where am I gonna, like, it was just really, really horrible. My head was spinning. I was just like laying in my hammock or in my bed, staring in the ceiling and processing what happened there. Just trying to understand where was I? Read a bunch of books, hired a bunch of cult experts to talk about. Someone recommended me you. Then yeah, spend lots of money on like all kinds of healing modalities, so somatic experiencing, NARM, did ayahuasca, because I also had physical pains. Wow. Like did lots of those alternative things that were very available for me while I was in Berlin. Then the second year hit. I got myself with a new therapist. She's Swedish. Because it's not that easy to find a cult recovery therapist, actually. It was really difficult to find someone. So I was on the waiting list with the Swedish one while I was working with the American one. And then I started working with the Swedish one. And then I got diagnosed with like a bunch of things to the point where she did not tell me, but now she told me that she met me when I was severely depressed. I was psychologically completely fragmented. And I got diagnosed with exhaustion. oh, there's another thing that happened, but never mind. I got I needed medical care basically. So I started to go to doctors, needed a bunch of supplements because, you know, I haven't been to a doctor for a long time because I was traveling, running workshops all over the world. So I had to catch up with the medical stuff that were ongoing. I started to have joint pains. I finally decided to take medication to calm myself because I was constantly in stress. I got prescribed sleeping pills. I'm still on sleeping pills, and now it's the third year, and I'm like, I don't know what I'm gonna do with my life. Okay, so luckily I got an idea that I should start study law. So I'm going to apply to study law at my university here in Lithuania because I've got very, very sensitive to vulnerability and to protect vulnerable people. There's some laws that need to be changed. People need to be aware about this thing that's called coercive control because it's nowhere found in the legal scriptures, the legal books. So I'm going to try to study the law, but I'm really, really scared that my health will not allow me because I've been just horizontal for very, very long time. My health is very unstable. Right now, I was sick for 2 months, like straight on sick for 2 months, and it's horrible. I would have never imagined that it could be so debilitating, also physically, but also psychologically, emotionally. I don't trust people. I don't want to make friends. The only people that I'm hanging out with my family members. My whole career is kind of like, I don't know what the fuck that thing was. There's like too much entanglement of the cult stuff for me to pick out the good pieces. I'm scared even to work with people because I'm scared that I will influence them in the bad way. I'm scared that what I'm learned is false and harmful. So there's constant vigilance and yeah, it's just like it's social life gone, hobbies gone, health gone, so psychological stability gone, memory, like right now my memory is getting better, but last year with exhaustion, I was just like lay in bed and I could not even think, what day is today?
Right.
What do I have to do? Like it was really that I would have like good days every few weeks. So I couldn't work. I'm burning my savings. Thank God my family got my back. If I didn't have my family, I don't know what I would do. I probably would kill myself.
Mm.
Like I
Mm.
literally don't have the I still haven't found what to live for. And I'm really hoping that the studies will give me something to live for. Because right now
Yeah.
everything got taken away.
Yeah.
And for that I'm
I,
really mad at Brad.
mm, I, I can relate. Let me just say that. I'm just going to say that. That very little else to say about all of that, except I am wishing you the very best in moving forward with this. Been there, done that. And
Yeah.
it is not an easy path. Anybody who thinks it is just hasn't been on it.
Yeah.
Um,
And I know that I'm not the only one. And I know that these symptoms are like, I'm not like, these are the textbook symptoms. I'm also following other survivors. And it has been such a lifeline to see your work and then other survivors' work, how they have recovered, because otherwise I would be feeling very alone and kind of like, what's wrong with me again? But now I
yeah.
know what
Yeah.
happened.
No, I get it. Oh man, do I get it. No, there is another side to this. The grass does get greener and life does become worth living again. Please believe me on that. Because
Yeah.
as many ups and downs as I have had, and boy, have they been legion. Um, oh man, I grew up, I don't know, anyway, pretty flat, but in terms of challenges in my life, maybe a little bit of a gradual upslope. But coming out of a cult, whoo, it's a wild ride. Um, I will say that I think that you are doing all the right things. I will say that. Just a little
Yeah.
bit of evaluation out here, right? But because you're learning, you're speaking, you're associating, you are not necessarily jumping full bore into the fight. That is not necessary right away. Self-help, self-care is the best care, and we definitely want people in this fight, but we want people who, well, we want you to have some hope.
Yeah. I'm reminding myself every day. It's like there's something. People told me that there's something on the other side of this. So I'm just gonna
There
I'll
is.
stick around to check it.
There is. There is. I'm being radically honest with you. Yeah, horrible joke. Okay. Um, I think we have sort of laid out the picture here of what this was all about. Certainly, the consequences to you personally were great, and are unacceptable. We do not want anybody to have to experience this kind of thing, at all. And clearly, no one deserves this. No one. Right? No one deserves or asks for coercive control or, overwhelming thought reform. So I definitely am wishing you the very best moving forward in this. Are you? It took us a while to set this up.
Mhm.
Are you yet public facing? Are you looking for people to contact you, or should we put anything out there like that?
Yeah. So, um, a good lawyer, a cult assassin lawyer, she's called a cult assassin. She said, Yura, I don't know what's the right thing to do, but doing something might be, is like might be something that's exactly what you're looking like, what could be helpful for you. And it's true. Like the more I speaking is scary, and gives me anxiety, which is not really good. But then with the more I speak, the less pressure I feel. So it's like I feel like I'm carrying this heavy burden with me. And then
Yeah.
I speak about it. And then I feel like, oh, finally, like I got this off my chest. So I am speaking out. I just
Good.
published videos that I made last year with another cult like cult leader, with another person from the cult. So I'm posting those videos, and I'm finally publishing the things that I wrote, because I took like hundreds of notes when I was. It's like, and this happened and that happened. How did this? So now I'm publishing on Substack, what I have written. I still heavily use AI because I get overwhelmed with all the content, but then like I really like it gives me some confidence. Like at least I'm good at writing this. At least I'm good at advocating for people. I'm also receiving emails from people who have done radical honesty like in 25 years ago, for example. And there are days when I get into this detective mode where I go through emails and look for evidence. And so there are things happening in the background, and because I'm speaking about it, there are other people joining, looking at the facts and like deconstructing, but also kind of trying to think what to do with all of this, because
Right.
I think that it needs to be reported. I think that people need to be aware of it. I think that it's very, very dangerous. I think it's a mental health hazard.
Yep.
I think that the government should know about it. Yeah, I would like everyone to know, so people can contact me, especially if, because you guys are Americans. So in the US, you probably know, you have worked or have heard of Brad back in the day. So especially I would like to hear about the early days when the internet wasn't a thing, to kind of like help to put the things more together.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay,
I'm
great.
really,
Well, I will get your Substack there on the screen and in the description section below here so people can connect with you that way and take it from there. All I can say is you're on the exact same road I am on. And it just keep walking one step at a time, one day at a time. Sometimes, quite honestly, it's 1 hour at a time.
yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
Again, I get it. So get it. It does get better. And And that's all I can say. There's, unfortunately, even with all the drugs and treatment modalities and communications and everything else you can do, there's this goddamn thing called time. And
No.
it's just, it's sometimes it's untenable, it's unbearable, it's, you know, but it's just something about the human experience requires time to
Yeah.
just let it process and deal, you know. Um,
Mhm.
anyway, Jura, I want to really, really thank you today for speaking out and having the courage to do so. I know this isn't easy.
Thanks, Chris, for the platform.
You
I'm
bet.
looking forward to talk more in the future when maybe there's going to be some effects, ripple effects from this interview.
Yes, I am sure. And afterwards, I'll give you a couple other references to some things too that might be of assistance to you in your work.
Great.
All right, folks, we're going to wrap up. So I hope that this today has been informative, educational, maybe a little entertaining, but certainly the informative part. That's what we're all about here. And I hope you feel more informed now about, you know, radical honesty. Again, I will reiterate what I said at the beginning. It's not about the validity of the belief. It is about what is done with it. And I hope we have made that abundantly clear in today's episode. There's ain't nothing wrong with telling the truth. That's not the point. Okay. So I hope that you will support the channel and subscribe and all of that kind of thing. And on that happy note, I will see you guys next week. Bye-bye.